Now obviously this is the Goodyear Wrangler DuraTrack, and you've all seen this tire by now. Alright, so what I have to do today is put a new belt onto the Super Duty. So basically what I have noticed, it's got 100,000 miles on it now, by the way. The belt is, according to the manual, good for 150,000 miles, but I'm going to go ahead and swap it out anyway because I have to put a new tensioner on it. Apparently the tensioner on my truck has started to go berserk on me, because if it's really cold outside and I start the truck, it sounds like somebody's under the hood shaking a can of marbles. It's just terrible. And when I pop the hood and check it all out, I think it's coming from the tensioner. It could be one of the idler pulleys. We'll find out when we get in there, but I think it's the tensioner. So since I have to go in there and take the old belt off and swap this out, I figured it would be a good opportunity to go ahead and put a new belt on the truck right now. So let me show you what we've got here. Let me get the camera a little closer. So I ended up buying a Gates brand tensioner. Gates usually makes really good stuff, and it was a whole lot less expensive than the Motorcraft tensioner. However, I did buy a couple of new Motorcraft idler pulleys. My truck has a single alternator, so I've got just one tensioner and two of these idler pulleys. You can see here to replace. And here is the new belt. I did get a Motorcraft belt. There's a part number on that. So everything here is Motorcraft except for the tensioner, which, like I said, Gates usually makes pretty good stuff, so I'm not too concerned about that. So the other thing I did was I got onto the Ford Truck Enthusiasts forum and asked a couple of questions about the torque specs, because I don't have a service manual, and a very nice gentleman on there posted the torque specs for me. And according to the manual, these bolts on the idler pulleys and on the tensioner should be torqued to about 35 foot-pounds. My torque wrench is old. It's an old Harbor Freight cheap torque wrench, and I don't know for sure if it's still calibrated correctly, so I'll probably set my torque wrench to 40. Just give it a little bit more. It won't hurt anything to do that. I'd rather give it a little bit more and just make sure this stuff is torqued properly when I put it on. So anyway, let's go to the truck and see how big of a nightmare this is going to be. So first of all, I have this work platform that I bought at Lowe's back on Black Friday. I got this thing for like 35 bucks, and the reason I got it is so that I can reach stuff in here. You guys know these Super Duty trucks, they sit up really high, especially when you got a leveling kit and some 35-inch tires on there. So hopefully this work platform, oh yeah, that makes it a whole lot better. So if we look down in there, I mean, you can see that there's not a whole lot of room to work. Now what I'm going to probably do, certainly going to take off this air duct right here, and let's see, might not have to take anything off over here, but if I do, it would probably just be this hose right here. I can just disconnect that from that end, kind of move it out of the way, and that should give me a little bit better access, because I'm gonna have to go down in here with my big breaker bar. Reason I'm using a breaker bar is because it's the only 24-inch long tool that I've got to reach down in there and get to that tensioner, so I can remove the tension from the belt. So but the very first thing I'm going to do is disconnect the negative cable on both of the batteries, just to make sure, you know, it's probably never going to happen, but just to make sure that the engine doesn't try to fire over while I've got my hands down in there working. So let's do that first, and then I'll get to removing some of this stuff and make a little better access. I will say that this truck is a 2019 model, and my cousin has the 2020 model. And when I pop the hood on his truck, it is amazing how much worse the access is under there. So if you got a 2020 or newer, you've got even more of a tight squeeze in here, and it makes it even tougher to work on. So 17 to 19 models, maybe not as bad. Still not going to be a walk in the park, but I think once I move a couple of hoses here, I can get to it at least. All right, so at this point, I've got the air intake ductwork removed over there, and I took off this intercooler connection over here, and now you can kind of see, you know, the pulley that goes around the alternator, for example, over there. And over here on this side, we've got pretty decent access over here now. Looks like there's an electrical connection right down here that I'm going to have to disconnect, and it's got a bolt that goes into the front cover, looks like. And that's going to have to be removed because the belt goes around that. There's no way to physically pull the belt up out of there with that bolt in place. So definitely going to have to remove that. But the good news is the tensioner, I can see it now. Here's one of the idler pulleys right here. And the other idler pulley should be, wow, that one's going to be tough to get to. It's down in here. It's the fan shroud's going to make some access issues on that one, unfortunately. But I mean, it could be worse. The access could be worse. I think I can get in here and get this done. Now the question is, can I set the camera up over here somewhere so that you can kind of see what's going on? I'll try. All right, so obviously the first thing I'm going to do is try to get onto the tensioner, which might be kind of hard to do with this particular tool. And looks like the answer is yes, that's going to be hard to do. All right, so the problem that I'm going to have here is that my breaker bar is a 1/2 inch breaker bar, but the tensioner needs a 3/8, so I had to put my adapter on here. And when I do that, it makes this too wide. And so I'm running into the actual fan blade itself. And I don't think that even if I move the fan blade a little bit, I don't think that's going to make enough extra space to really make a difference here. No, actually it's into the base of the fan. It's not hitting a fan blade. It's actually up against the base of the fan. So that's going to be a no-go. So I was watching a couple of other videos on this, and I noticed that some of the guys have a special tool that's like a flat piece of bar stock with just a 3/8, end on it. And I was wondering why they were using that. Well, now I can see why, because it's just a physical space issue is all it is. This would work if you just had room to do it, but I don't. So here we go. Right off the bat, I'm going to have to improvise and figure something else out. So let me go see what I can whip up. I got it, and here's how I did it. I used a regular 3/8 ratchet, but as you can see, this thing is kind of small, so you're not going to have a whole lot of torque to put on there. So then I just grabbed my great big wrench and put on there like this, and that gave me enough torque to work the tensioner. So, if you got tools in your toolbox, usually you can figure out how to do something. Thankfully that worked. So now I just have to remove that large bolt down there for that electrical connector, and I can get this old belt up out of here. So I've gotten to the point now where I pulled that white locking tab up on that electrical connector, and now you're supposed to push on that and just slide that whole electrical connector off of your fan. I guess that's the electrical signal that operates the clutch in the fan or whatever. But anyway, I'm having trouble. I got that white clip to slide up, but now when I squeeze that tab, I can't get the connector to come off of the fan, and I certainly don't want to break it down in there. So that's what I'm fighting with now. And once I get that electrical connector removed and go ahead and slide that bolt out, I can move that out of the way, and then I can finally take the old belt out of this thing and start replacing idler pulleys. you know, it's going slow. I'm going to be honest with you. Not a walk in the park, but you know, I am slowly making progress here, so that's good. So the most difficult part of this job so far, hands down, has been this electrical connector for your fan clutch. So I did finally get the connector to come loose, and there's a white tab on there that you unlock, and then you squeeze on it while you pull the connector out. But that's very difficult to do, so I ended up having to come on the bottom side of it with a pick and release that tab that holds it on, and then I finally was able to get that out of the way. And I've got that really long bolt out. Where did it go? Here it is. Look how long this bolt is. That's the bolt that goes into the front cover and holds that bracket on. But there is room to remove this without having to take the fan shroud out. So I finally got that done, but now the problem that I have is that the wire, see that connector right down there? I don't know if the camera's showing it or not, but there's one of those Christmas tree style clips that goes into the bracket, and the connection is taped to it so that the wiring doesn't get caught up in the fan belt, which is a great idea, but I wish they hadn't used that kind of clip. And it's way down in there, so there's no way to get both of your hands down in there and use a set of needle nose pliers on it to squeeze that clip out. So I'm gonna have to think about how to get that clip out of there now. Once I get that clip out so I can separate the electrical wire from the bracket, I will finally be through the most difficult part of this job, and then I can take the old belt out. But I'm telling you, it's going slow. At least it's going, right? There it is, the bane of my existence. So what you got to do, you know, this little flat part right here has the tape on it. That's what tethers the electrical connection to the bracket. And then this little Christmas tree part pushes down in there. So you got to squeeze on that with some pliers so that you can pop it out. And like I said, it is not easy to do when you don't have hardly any room to work down in there. But I finally got to the point where that is free, so I can get the, well, where's it at? Oh, it fell down in there. Anyhow, I got the fan clutch connector, you can see it down in there, loose. And the wiring harness is loose. Finally, I can start taking this old belt back out of here. This belt is like a mile long, so it's probably going to take you a little while to work it up out of here. But I do have access to all of the belt routing diagrams. Usually what I would do is take a picture with my phone before I start taking the belt off, you know, and that way you remember exactly how it went. But in this case, you can't get a phone down in there. Heck, you can barely get your arm down in there. So there we go. Alright, so now what I got to do obviously is just verify that this new belt that I got is the same size as the old one. And it should be, but I'm just going to hook it onto something here and check. Oh yeah, it's the same. Same belt. So now the real fun begins. Alright, I got the tensioner off and I noticed something very interesting. So here's the box that the tensioner came in, right? It's a Gates brand with a Gates number on it. But when I look at these two tensioners, something very interesting becomes readily apparent, and that is that the Gates one is a Ford one. Now this is how it came out of the box. The Ford Motor Company name was simply grinded off but this marking right here is exactly the same on both. The part number, which I don't know if you can see, is exactly the same. It's also listed over here on the Ford one. So all of the markings are exactly the same. It appears that Gates makes the ones that Ford uses and puts their name on, or maybe, you know, there's something else going on here, but the point is these are actually the same tensioner, which is a good thing. So the tensioner's not too bad. I was able to just put both hands down in here, put the tensioner on, and now I'm using my right hand to run the screw in, or the bolt rather. That wasn't too bad. Now I can just put the torque wrench down there and torque it to spec. And this idler pulley right here is going to be pretty easy too, looks like. I would imagine that the only problem I'm going to run into, I would say, is that idler over here. But it might not be too bad, I don't know. Let's see. Good. Oh man, there goes. Thankfully my socket stayed on there. Nothing like an electric ratchet, I'm telling you. It just makes things so much easier. Well, that bolt is coming out, but it's not loosening up to the touch any. The problem is I'm starting to get into the fan again now with my electric one, so there it goes. Now, I don't think my idler pulleys came with new bolts. The tensioner had a new bolt supplied with it. So I'm going to hang on to this bolt in case I need to reuse it. Well, actually I was wrong. The new one does have a new bolt in there. Awesome. So that part was pretty easy. I mashed my finger already. Bad thing about it is I've got a set of gloves here, but you just don't have much dexterity when you're using gloves. So some parts I have to take my gloves off. Well, heck, I wasn't hanging on to my ratchet very good, was I? My goodness. That was a user error right there. Alright, so the tensioner is on, that idler pulley is on. Now I just got to get that one over there. I'm going to try to get my electric ratchet over here. Alright, well, that wasn't as bad as I expected. I guess I shouldn't say much yet though, because I don't have it off yet, do I? Ah, there it goes. So that part of the job isn't too bad. You do have enough access to get in there and get your pulleys off and get the new ones back on pretty easy. The tensioner was pretty easy to get off and on. There's that one. Alright, so I got my torque wrench. Like I said, the spec on this is 35 foot-pounds, but I have my torque wrench set to 40 just to make sure that it's tight, because I don't know how good the calibration is on this torque wrench. I've had it for about 10 or 15 years, but there we go, there's that one. And Now I got to reach over here and get that other idler pulley. There we go. All right, and I already did the tensioner down there. It's a little bit harder to get to. So all of these are installed and they're all torqued to spec. So now it's time to start trying to get the new belt on. And it looks to me like the only really hard part is going to be that crank pulley down there, because it's just so far down there, you know. But we'll see what happens. Alright, here's the new one, and I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and drop the belt down in there like this, and I might try to start by looping it around the tensioner, but I got to get this down in there first. I wonder if some of these might be a little easier if you don't have an extra person to help you. It might be easier to go under the truck and maybe try to reach up there and get it around the crank pulley, it looks like. I don't know. We'll have to investigate that as we go, I guess. But I'm going to try and go around the tensioner first. I'm going to get the camera and show you what I'm looking at here so you can see what the dilemma is. So when you're looking down in here, well, maybe you can't see it. Let me get this light up here out of the way. So when you look down through here, you can see the crank pulley way down there. But there's like 2 or 3 pulleys that are kind of stacked on top of one another here. So you're just going to have to go through there slowly and try to get it onto each pulley one by one. Maybe start down low and work your way up would be easier, I think. And you know, the problems that you sometimes run into is you get the belt wrapped around one pulley over here and then it'll slide off a pulley over there, that kind of thing. So, you know, you can always use some temporary measures to hold the belt on the pulleys so that it won't come off, and then when you get ready to, you know, use your tensioner to do this last idler pulley up here, then you can take that off, maybe put some tape on there or a zip tie or something like that around certain pulleys to hold the belt on, you know, just until you get it tight. I might end up having to do that, but yeah, I made it this far, so let me finish routing this belt and then I'll put that electrical connector back on and start buttoning this thing back up, thankfully. You know, something that I think is really weird. When I was growing up, vehicles always had a sticker on the hood somewhere or maybe down here that showed you the belt routing diagram, but they don't do that anymore. The last several vehicles that I've had do not do that anymore. So I've had to get online here and look at the belt routing diagram from the service manual, and I think I finally got it. That ratchet that's there is just stuck in there to hold the belt from coming off that pulley. Like I said, I've got one down there below too. You can't see it from here, but I've got some tools down there holding the belt on the crank pulley too. Just whatever you can do, zip ties or whatever. You know, once you get a pulley routed, you know, the belt routed around it, you don't want it to come back off. So do whatever you can to hold it on there. But at this point, I've got everything routed, and all I've got to do is work my tensioner and put this belt right here around the new idler pulley there, and we will be done. And then I can start putting the bracket back on for the fan clutch and start wrapping this thing up. I've got about 3 hours in this so far, and I'm not done just yet, so we'll call it 4 hours to do this job, and I've never done it before. I am by no means a mechanic, but I like to say I know enough to be dangerous. So I can do this, you can do this, as long as you got patience and the right tools. I mean, I've used all of my tools. I've got a crowbar, down there. I've got a torque wrench, all my sockets, ratchets, screwdriver, pliers, you name it. I've got all my tools out here just putting this belt on this truck. So anyway, I'm gonna go ahead and try to get this on and start working on that fan clutch bracket. Like I said, I've got my regular 3/8 drive ratchet down here. And then I've got my great big wrench on that for leverage. So this thing still feels like it's pretty tight for some reason. Oh, there it goes. Woo! Man. I guess because it's a diesel engine, they've got to have some really tight fit on that belt. That tensioner's got some power behind it, but looks like the new belt is on. Awesome. I might go eat some dinner and take a break and then come back and finish up the other little things that need to be done. Alright, so you remember how I told you that the electrical connection for your fan clutch was secured to that bracket? Well, rather than trying to reach down in there with two hands and put more tape on that, I decided just to use a big heavy duty tie strap and zip tie it to the bracket. So that should work just fine. I've already got the connection made again, as you can see, and that white tab is pushed down to lock it in place. So now all I got to do is put that long bolt back in the bracket to secure it to that front cover, and then I think I'll be finished with this. That bolt that holds that bracket in is a tremendous amount of fun to get to, let me tell you, but just like everything else under here, I guess, but it's doable. Try to get it finger tight before I put the ratchet on it. I think it's just about there, so time to get out the ratchet and finish it off now. So now I can start buttoning this thing back up. Gonna use my electric ratchet here to tighten these clamps up. Gotta get them back in the position that they were in before. There we go. I thought that I was losing my glove there. Gosh. Oh man. Got a hold of my glove. It got sucked into that worm clamp. Let's try that again. Alright. That's more like it. Make sure that's tight. I had disconnected that because I was going to take this whole thing off the throttle body, but I decided that probably not worth it to do all that, so I put that back on. And now it looks like all I got to do is put the ductwork back on the air filter here. So I'm going to slide the oval shaped end on here first, I think, and then try to get this to go up on there. There we go. There we go. Nice and tight. Ford uses some really weird sizes. Usually these are 8mm, but on the Ford trucks, at least this one, they're 7mm. And where I normally see 10mm, like for example on the batteries, I had to use an 11mm. So Ford just likes to do some weird stuff. I don't know why they do that. Oops. Guess I could bring my socket with me, huh? I want to get it nice and tight. Don't want any air leaks. All right, there we go. Looks like it's all buttoned up and done now. So that is how you put a serpentine belt and a new tensioner and 2 new idler pulleys on one of these 6.7 liter diesel engines. If you got dual alternators, I can't help you. I'm assuming it would be a similar process, but you know, you throw another alternator in over here and it could completely change this whole thing, because obviously that's going to take up the space that you noticed that I had over here to work underneath here. Well, if you got an alternator over there, it's going to take up that space. So that could completely change this job. I don't know. But most of these trucks, I think, probably have the single alternator like I do. So if you do, there you go. That's how you do it. So like I said, about 4 hours. I don't know. Was it the most difficult job I've ever done? No, but it certainly wasn't any fun. Certainly not something that I would ever care to do again. So, whew, now all I gotta do is hook my batteries back up, and then look at that, we got power again. By the way, these AGM batteries are badass. I love these things. Ever since I put those on this truck and changed the settings in the computer to accept an AGM battery, when I turn the key, man, it's like bam, this thing starts right up. It doesn't matter what the temperature is out here, it starts right up now. So definitely a good thing for this truck to get a couple of new batteries. There we go. Now I gotta get my weirdo 11mm socket and tighten those up, and the job will be complete. All right, guys, that's all I got for now. I noticed while I was up under this truck trying to fish the belt around the crank pulley that I've got a little bit of oil leak on the oil pan down there, and that does not make me happy. This truck has 100,000 miles on it, and at about 40,000 it had the upper oil pan leak repaired, and it's been fine for the last 60,000 miles. So I mean, I feel like the technicians who did the job probably did a pretty good job for it to last that long, but it is starting to show signs of leaking again down there now, and I'm assuming it's probably that upper oil pan again, which is a major pain. It's an expensive repair, something I can't afford to do right now, and I'm not sure that that's a job that I really want to take on myself. Not really sure. I had to think about it, do a little research on it, but I'm just going to let it go for now. This truck is fully serviced front to back otherwise, and now I got a new belt and everything on here, so I'm just gonna roll with it. We're still in the middle of winter here. We got a lot of rain and snow coming back in the picture, so I need the truck to be up and running. I'm just gonna keep rolling with it, and maybe when spring or summer comes, I'll get under there and evaluate the oil leak and see if it really is the upper pan again and how bad it is. But for now, I'm gonna wrap this up and appreciate you guys watching. Until next time, we'll see you later.